Our daughter Ashley's delivery went smoothly, and we had just returned home that day. Right then, a gift arrived from Ashley's husband, Henry, who couldn't be there for the birth due to work commitments. Though they had been in touch, Ashley clearly missed Henry and eagerly received the package, delighted. "Everyone, please enjoy this. I wonder what he sent. Knowing Henry, it must be something I love." Ashley opened the package with pure joy. However, her joy quickly faded as her complexion turned pale upon opening it. As Ashley suddenly fell silent, we all peered into the package. Inside was just a dirty rag. And within, a note simply stating, "Don't come back." What is this? What does it mean? What's this about? Did Henry really send us this? In stark contrast to our shock, my husband, Kevin, visibly angry, threw the rag to the floor. It must be some mistake. It had to be. Surely, this is some kind of mistake. Should we contact Henry? I gently asked the clearly distraught Ashley, who had become silent and looked down, saying nothing more. This was too much for Ashley, who had just gone through childbirth. I couldn't bear to see her so exhausted and upset. But then, an unexpected turn of events was about to unfold. Kevin came home from work earlier than usual, with a somewhat relieved expression. Before I could ask what happened, Kevin spoke. With a deep breath, he grimaced, bit his lip in frustration, and then announced, "It appears that was meant as a warning. My name is Heather. I'm a 57-year-old and I'm supporting my fate as a housewife. Growing up, I was always looking up to my dad, an elite banker. During my school years, I had to be at the top of my class, or Dad would scold me, so my days were filled with nothing but study. Lacking time to play with friends, I led a solitary life at school. Thus, I enrolled in a prestigious university, as Dad suggested. If my grades fell, Dad would threaten not to pay my tuition. However, as I was preparing to find a job, Dad passed away in a car accident. The sudden loss left me utterly lost. Mom grieved daily over Dad's sudden absence. To reassure her, I took a job at a bank. Though Dad was strict, I realized that it was thanks to him I had been so dedicated to my studies. Grateful for this, I was happy to work at the bank, and Mom was overjoyed that I followed in Dad's footsteps. That's where I met someone. Most of my colleagues quickly married and left the job. In our 20s, only women with no desire to marry or those like me, completely dedicated to their work, remained. The bank was a busy place, making it hard to blend in with others around. Even though I was capable at my job, my inability to marry was mocked by my boss. Still, I diligently applied what I had studied in college to my work. Then, one day, after years of this routine, I was introduced to a man by my boss. That man was my husband, Kevin. In the company, he was known as a competent worker, trusted by our boss, and beloved by his colleagues. Being introduced to Kevin, who was cheerful and good-natured, took me by surprise initially. Though we had worked together on several occasions, our interactions had been limited to work-related conversations. The idea of going on a date with him was beyond my expectations. Yet, I found myself accepting his invitation to dine out. Kevin, with his constant SE, turned out to be a very kind and considerate person. Soon after, our relationship progressed swiftly towards marriage. I felt confident that with him, we could build a happy family. Kevin was indeed a wonderful person. Once we decided to marry, we bought a house and embarked on a new life together. Thanks to Kevin's stable income, I left my job to become a housewife. Both of us wanted children eventually. However, reality proved to be harsh, and despite the passage of time, we remained childless. 3 years into our marriage, I was diagnosed with a condition that made it difficult to conceive. The thought that I was the reason we couldn't have children was devastating. But Kevin was there to encourage me, insisting we face the challenge together. With his support, I began fertility treatments. Years passed without success, but finally, after 5 years, our long-awaited wish was granted, and I became pregnant. We were overjoyed at the news of our forthcoming child. Months passed and I gave birth to our beloved daughter. Kevin adored her even more than I did. Once Ashley was born, Kevin made it a point to leave work early, skipping company dinners to come home. Raised with our undivided love, Ashley grew into a very kind child. She was earnest and kind, always sing, just like Kevin. Time flew, and before we knew it, Ashley was a college student. Supporting her desire to help others, we encouraged her as she pursued her studies with enthusiasm. As graduation approached, Ashley expressed her wish to work in the city. While I supported her, Kevin found the idea of her moving away difficult to accept. It's natural for parents to worry about their children. But we encouraged her and Ashley moved to the city. Busy with her job, she seldom returned home, which initially left us feeling lonely. However, we wholeheartedly supported Ashley's dreams. Years went by, and Ashley, now 29, had apparently been promoted at work. Lately, my only joy has been our monthly calls with Ashley. "Mom, thanks for always sending packages." "It's no problem. How's work going? Are you keeping well? Everything okay?" Ashley would always laugh off my worries, seeming a bit troubled by my concern. "Mom, you worry too much. I'm 29 now. You don't need to worry so much." "But I hardly get to see you, Ashley. It's natural for a parent to worry." Worrying was, after all, a natural thing. "But you don't need to worry about me anymore." Despite my concerns, Ashley's voice was full of excitement. What could she mean? Then, taking a deep breath as if bracing herself, Ashley said, "I have someone I want you and Dad to meet." I couldn't hide my surprise at Ashley's words, as she had never introduced us to anyone before. "Who is it? Tell me." "It's a secret until we meet." Ashley, laughing childishly, sounded a bit excited as she hung up. A few days later, Ashley brought a tall man in a suit to meet us. I was surprised, but Kevin, who adores Ashley, was even more so. The idea of Ashley bringing home a boyfriend seemed to shock him. "I never thought she'd actually bring someone home. She used to say she'd marry me when she was little. Ashley is an adult. It's not strange for her to have a boyfriend." Despite my efforts to reassure Kevin, accepting the reality of his beloved Ashley having a boyfriend was hard for him. Sitting close to the man, Ashley introduced him with a happy essay. "This is Henry. He works in landscaping." "I'm Henry. I'm in a committed relationship with Ashley. It's a pleasure to meet you." Henry seemed sincere and serious, and although Kevin was initially wary, they gradually warmed up to each other. Henry grew up in a home without a father after his parents divorced. He had difficulty fitting in and finding opportunities to meet people due to his busy work life. But then he met Ashley. They were introduced by a mutual acquaintance and recently started dating. Ashley was there for Henry, offering support and kindness during tough times at work. With Ashley's support, Henry found himself more engaged in his work than ever before. All thanks to Ashley. She's my savior. Hearing Henry speak so fondly, I was on the verge of tears as a parent. To think that he cherished Ashley so much. Kevin was moved by Henry's words too, and the two of them became close enough to chat about trivial matters. I was convinced that Henry was someone we could entrust our precious Ashley to. The impression of Henry was that good. I was sure that a marriage proposal was on the horizon. Ashley and Henry seemed to trust each other that much. But then, about 6 months later, something unimaginable happened. As usual, I had sent Kevin off to work and was dedicating myself to household chores. When suddenly, my mobile phone rang. Picking up, curious, it was Ashley. A wave of anxiety washed over me, wondering what could have happened.
Ashley, what's up? Calling in the middle of the day like this?
Normally, she would be at work at this time. Yet, Ashley, with a voice not her usual bright self but somewhat darker, said,
I took some leave.
Took leave? Are you not feeling well? What happened?
Ashley seemed hesitant to talk.
Well, there's something I need to talk about.
Usually, she would be bright and talk about Henry or her job. But today, her voice was devoid of cheer, sounding somewhat listless. Ashley started talking about something that seemed to be troubling her. Apparently, things weren't going well with Henry's mom.
What do you mean? Didn't you say you went out to eat with her before?
There hadn't been such issues when they first started dating. I had heard they were getting along well with Henry's mom. Yet, what could have happened in just 6 months? I asked Ashley what went wrong.
The truth is, things have never really been good with Henry's mom.
She had been trying not to worry us. I wished she had talked to us sooner. But maybe Ashley found it difficult to consult us. Gently asking what happened, Ashley let out a small sigh.
Recently, Henry and I discussed about marriage. Considering our ages, it was time for us to think, she said.
I suddenly remembered a call from Ashley a few days ago. She had mentioned then that they were talking about their future. But at that time, her voice was brighter, and she seemed happy talking about it. But it seems that wasn't the case in reality. Ashley mentioned that Henry's mom, Nicole, was being harsh towards her. She had visited Nicole's house several times, but each time she was met with a cold attitude from Nicole. Why would she act like that? Ashley pondered over this and even discussed it with Henry. Henry suggested that Nicole might still be traumatized from when Henry's dad had an affair and left the home during his childhood. Nicole must have felt deep sorrow then and decided to raise Henry alone. I heard that she raised Henry by herself, cherishing him greatly, especially since Henry's grandparents had already passed away. Even now, Nicole supposedly calls Henry several times a week. I can somewhat understand her feelings. Any parent would worry about their precious child. But that doesn't justify her attitude towards Ashley. When asked if she did something wrong, Ashley could only say she didn't know. With marriage talks with Henry underway, it seems Ashley wants to avoid worsening her relationship with Nicole. Ashley said this, looking very downhearted. It was the first time I saw Ashley so troubled. I told her that perhaps she should talk it over with Henry. Though Ashley's voice was somber, sharing her concerns seemed to lighten her heart. She said she would discuss it thoroughly with Henry and try to persuade Nicole to understand. Despite some apprehension, I decided to leave it to Ashley. Then, 9 months later, I received a call from Ashley, her voice bright.
Henry proposed to me.
She reported her engagement with a joy I hadn't heard before. While I was delighted with the sudden engagement news, Ashley's previous concerns came to mind. When Ashley happily shared her engagement news, I asked about Nicole. Then, Ashley's previously bright voice turned a bit somber as she began to speak. Apparently, Nicole, who dotes on Henry, had not approved of the marriage. Moreover, the engagement announcement seemed to have made Nicole colder towards Ashley. It seemed Nicole felt like Ashley was taking Henry away from her, and despite Henry's attempts to persuade her, it didn't go well. After much deliberation, they decided to go ahead with the marriage despite Nicole's objections. On one hand, I was upset at Nicole for treating Ashley harshly. On the other hand, I felt helpless about not being able to say anything strong to the people Ashley would be dealing with. Reluctantly, I told Ashley, "Let me know immediately if anything happens." They had decided on their new home and were proceeding with the moving arrangements. I wholeheartedly congratulated Ashley and Henry. But then, not long after, Ashley and Henry came to our house saying they had something to discuss.
What's happened?
Kevin asked anxiously. The two exchanged glances and then said happily,
"I'm going to be a mom."
She showed us an ultrasound photo with a happy expression. There, a still tiny baby was pictured. We were overjoyed, especially Kevin, who was more excited than anyone about the grandchild's arrival.
"I can't believe we're going to have a grandchild. There's nothing happier than this." "You're exaggerating. I haven't even fully realized it yet."
Ashley, blushing with a shy essay, made me suddenly think of something. It was about Nicole. If she hadn't even accepted their marriage, what would she say upon finding out about the pregnancy? When I asked Ashley about it, Henry, with a stern look, said,
"I'll try to convince Mom again."
Apparently, Nicole became even harsher towards Ashley after their marriage, and when they announced the pregnancy, she yelled,
"Why would you have a child so quickly? That's strange, isn't it? You must have lured Henry into marrying you."
Nicole accused. Ashley and Henry insisted that wasn't true, but Nicole wouldn't listen, Ashley said sadly. Henry told Nicole there was no need to be so angry, but she initially wouldn't accept it. However, worried that the constant complaints would burden pregnant Ashley, Henry persuaded Nicole several times, explaining the accusations were baseless. For now, Nicole seems somewhat convinced, but she still harshly blames Ashley. "I can't believe this is happening to you guys. But remember, we are here for you both. Give birth to your child in peace."
That's right. There's nothing happier than Ashley being pregnant.
Encouraged by our strong words, Ashley and Henry nodded with teary eyes. I had heard about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts, but never imagined Ashley would experience it. And it was unforgivable that Nicole complained for such strange reasons. But Ashley's trials didn't end there. Since becoming pregnant, Ashley's morning sickness worsened, and she started missing work. I visited Ashley several times and cooked meals for her. But her health didn't improve, and she ended up bedridden, according to Henry. I kept worrying and sending meals to Henry, but he refused to accept more, not wanting to worry us. Amid growing anxiety, several months after the pregnancy announcement, I received an early morning call. It was from Ashley, and I rushed to answer, asking,
"What's wrong, Ashley?"
Through sobs, Ashley's voice came through. Confused, I listened as she quietly said,
"I want to go back home to give birth."
Feeling uneasy, I asked why. It seemed Nicole was the cause. Nicole had been calling daily, demanding to divorce her son. She yelled not to have the child, pushing Ashley to her mental limit. "Why didn't you talk to us sooner?" I asked Ashley, who sobbed through her explanation. It appears she had been pretending to be upbeat not to worry us. Tears overflowed from my eyes too. I woke Kevin to explain the situation. Realizing the gravity, Kevin sprang up, insisting we pick up Ashley immediately. After telling Ashley our plan, she responded in a weak voice. Henry, too, was exhausted. I suggested they both stay with us for a while. However, while Ashley was willing to accept, Henry rejected the proposal. Henry explained that due to work commitments, he simply couldn't leave. Reluctantly, it was decided that Ashley would return to our home, and about an hour after the call, I went to pick her up. Upon arrival at home, there was Ashley, visibly exhausted. She seemed to be mentally drained, clearly not her usual self. I instinctively hugged Ashley tightly. I'm sorry, I can't get away from work. If anything happens, please call me right away. I'll come as soon as I can, Henry said, hugging Ashley with a look of concern. Seeing how much they loved each other made my heart ache. To think they were being put through so much distress. I felt a surge of anger towards Nicole. From that day on, Ashley began living with us, away from Henry. Compared to her previous state, she seemed to be slowly recovering. Though there were times she wasn't feeling well, seeing Ashley become a bit brighter was reassuring. A few months after moving in with us, Ashley safely gave birth to the child. Kevin and I were moved to tears with joy at the birth of our adorable grandchild. It reminds me of when Ashley was born.
It's a moment too precious to forget, such a joyful event.
Kevin and I looked at each other, reminiscing about the time when Ashley was born. Ashley, blushing with embarrassment, immediately called Henry. She had informed Henry when she went into labor, but he couldn't make it in time. Henry was unable to attend the birth, but Ashley joyfully informed him of their child's arrival. However, Ashley's expression darkened after making the call. She looked dejected after hanging up. What's wrong? I asked Ashley.
He can't come right away. But he said he's sending a gift, something I like, she said.
Initially, Ashley was downcast, but she soon regained some of her spirits. It seems Henry was concerned about not being able to attend the birth and wanted to cheer Ashley up. He apologetically mentioned sending Ashley her favorite things. However, we suddenly felt something off about Henry. Even if he was busy with work, he should have made it a priority to be there for the birth of his child. This prioritization of work over childbirth made us slightly feel distrustful towards Henry. But since Ashley trusts him, we decided not to dwell on it further. Then, on the day Ashley returned from the hospital after giving birth, a gift from Henry arrived. Though they had been in touch, Ashley seemed sad about not being able to see Henry. Ashley was very pleased to receive the package.
Let's all enjoy this. I wonder what he sent. Knowing Henry, it must be something I love,
Ashley said, opening the package with visible happiness. However, her joy quickly faded as her complexion turned pale upon opening it. As Ashley became suddenly quiet, we too looked inside the package. Inside was just a dirty rag. And within, a note simply stating, "Don't come back."
What is this? What does it mean?
What's this? Did Henry really send us this?
Contrary to our shock, Kevin, visibly angry, threw the rag to the floor. It must be some kind of mistake. Surely, this is some kind of mistake. This doesn't make sense. Should we contact Henry? I gently asked Ashley, who had become silent and looked down, saying nothing more. However, Ashley remained silent, her face downturned, not speaking anymore. We focused on comforting Ashley, who was deeply distressed. To think she had to face this treatment after just giving birth. We couldn't bear to see Ashley so worn out. But then, an unexpected event occurred. Kevin came home from work earlier than usual, with a somewhat relieved look on his face. Before I could ask what happened, Kevin began to speak.
I contacted Nicole. It seems that was meant as a warning.
I was shocked at Kevin's words, uttered with a heavy sigh. It turns out the perpetrator of the package was not Henry, but Nicole. Kevin had tried to reach out to Henry on the day the package arrived, but got no response. With no other choice, Kevin contacted Nicole and confronted her. He couldn't stand to see Ashley sad any longer. Nicole confessed to taking a package meant for Ashley from busy Henry, swapping it with a dirty rag, and sending it. While shocked at such an unexpected revelation, I couldn't understand why she would do such a thing. However, Kevin's expression remained stern.
Nicole was trying to protect Ashley by being harsh on her all this time.
Upon being pressed, Nicole confessed everything to Kevin. Nicole confessed that she had once heard from a drunken Henry about embezzling company funds. With the issue unresolved and Ashley's marriage to Henry hastily decided, Nicole panicked. To prevent Ashley from getting involved in any trouble, Nicole admitted to being harsh towards her. It was Nicole's way of advising Ashley to stay away from Henry. The shock left us speechless. But we couldn't let Ashley continue to be saddened by this. We wanted to push for a divorce immediately, but we knew neither Ashley nor Henry would agree. So, we took immediate action. First, we contacted Nicole. She seemed surprised to hear from us, but quickly apologized.
I was wrong. I'm truly sorry for everything.
While it was difficult to forgive Nicole for her weak apology to Ashley, we requested her cooperation to get Henry to confess. Nicole hesitated for a moment, stumbling over her words, but then agreed, acknowledging that it couldn't be overlooked. We decided to tell a grieving Ashley everything about Henry. We shared everything Nicole had told us, explaining that it was all done to protect Ashley. Initially, Ashley seemed incredulous, but she appeared to trust our words eventually. Shortly after giving birth, we finally received a call from Henry, who had not once called or shown concern for Ashley since the birth. There was no way Kevin and I could forgive that. We were infuriated by the fact that he hadn't attended the birth nor had he made any contact after the birth.
Is Ashley okay? Now that work has calmed down, I should be able to stay in touch, Henry said, seemingly unconcerned.
Anger welled up at Henry's indifferent demeanor as he spoke. I briefly updated him on Ashley's condition and then quickly ended the call. To think Henry had deceived Ashley, who was raising a child on her own, and embezzled company money. We could no longer forgive Henry. A few days later, Nicole provided us with a recording of Henry's confession. His voice on the recording showed no remorse, speaking as if the matter was already resolved. He seemed utterly unconcerned about embezzling company funds and even mocked the deception of Ashley. It's all over now, isn't it? I've got a beautiful woman and have played the part of a good husband, he said. To think he thought of Ashley in such a way. With all the evidence compiled, I handed it over to Ashley. Ashley seemed resolved, initially saddened but unwilling to let her child be saddened, and sent the recording to Henry's company. It was 3 days later when Henry, unaware of these events, contacted Ashley. Suddenly, Ashley's mobile phone began to ring. There were multiple incoming calls from Henry. Ashley, now a protective mother, answered the phone with a strong stance.
What? I'm busy, you know. What's this about? Explain yourself. Why do you know about the embezzlement?
Henry's voice roared through the phone. Kevin frowned at Henry's blatant anger. Henry's voice grew even louder.
I'll be fired if this continues. Can't you, as my wife, speak to the company for me?
It appears the company's president had seen the evidence Ashley sent, leading to Henry's dismissal and a demand for compensation. Moreover, the company threatened to report him to the police if he didn't pay the damages. Henry must have contacted Ashley in a panic. Ashley sighed heavily at Henry's selfishness.
That's your own fault, isn't it? I don't know anything about that,
she responded dismissively. Henry began to show his irritation. The sound of something being thrown could be heard over the phone.
What's with that attitude? Acting all high and mighty when you don't even earn money.
I was stunned to hear such unprecedented shouts through the phone. To think such a person had been close to Ashley. But then, Kevin, who was right beside me, became furious and yelled back at Henry on the phone.
Enough is enough. Don't drag Ashley into this. This is all you're doing, yet you blame others.
It was rare for the usually de-mannered Kevin to get angry. But his voice was filled with a cold fury I had never heard before. Henry's voice trembled in response.
Well, there's a reason for this. It's not all my fault, you see.
Kevin raised his voice even more.
You've caused enough trouble for the company that's been good to you. Pay the compensation or I'll report you to the police myself.
Henry, perhaps panicked by Kevin's threat, promised to pay the compensation. But that was not enough to appease Kevin.
I can't leave Ashley with a criminal like you. We'll be pursuing a divorce.
Henry seemed not to expect such a reaction and tried to calm the situation with but the phone was hung up before he could finish.
Wait a minute.
Later, Henry promised to pay the compensation in one lump sum to his company. Thanks to this, the matter didn't escalate to police involvement, and he was only dismissed from his company. Subsequently, Ashley and Henry quickly proceeded with their divorce. After that, there was no further contact from Henry. Following this incident, Nicole reflected on her son's failings and lack of integrity, offering us an apology. We then ceased all contact with Nicole and had no further dealings with her. Meanwhile, Ashley, along with Kevin and I, began to raise her child together. An old friend of Ashley's from the neighborhood returned to the area, and they started seeing each other frequently, along with the child. They spent holidays together like a real fae, and he seemed to cherish Ashley deeply. He always seems to be there for Ashley, actively participating in parenting. He has come to greet Kevin and I several times, and he's a very pleasant person. The child seems to have grown fond of him too, and judging by their interactions, remarriage might be happening soon. Seeing Ashley and our grandchild sing happily together has given us great peace of mind.
Something feels off.
I try to pinch my cheeks to ward off the sudden wave of sleepiness, but it's utterly ineffective. There wasn't anything particularly exhausting about today, just a meal at my in-laws. And I'm not usually short on sleep. Why then, I wonder drowsily when I hear my husband's laughter.
Good night, LOL. I'll make sure you have sweet dreams.
My name is Lila, a 24-year-old office worker, newly married to Riley, who is 5 years my senior. We met through a friend and, after dating for 2 years, were happily married. We had a grand wedding recently and received blessings from many people. Just as I was dreaming about our happy married life ahead, an unexpected misfortune struck. Emerson, my mother-in-law, suddenly fell ill and passed away in no time. Emerson was cheerful and very kind, delighted when I first went to greet her.
Nice to meet you, I'm Lila. Oh, what a joy to have such a lovely woman as my son's wife. I've always dreamed of having tea time with my son's wife. I'd be delighted. Please, let's have tea time together.
Though I was nervous, Emerson welcomed me with a full smile, making me feel at ease and fond of her. We had planned to have tea time together after the wedding settled down, but that dream was shattered with Emerson's passing. We were busy with Emerson's funeral, sorting out her belongings, and handling the inheritance, finally settling down a year later. Then, I got a call from Trevor, my father-in-law.
Layla, how about a meal at our house next weekend night? I'm thinking of ordering takeout. Yes, of course. Thank you.
So, I was invited to dine with Trevor next weekend night, along with Riley. Trevor ordered Singaporean cuisine, which he loves, and we enjoyed the feast. The three of us gathered around the dining table. It was my first time trying Singaporean cuisine, and everything was delicious. Except, the soup tasted oddly. Curious, I asked my husband.
Hey Riley, doesn't this soup taste a bit strange? That's just how this dish is. You're not used to Singaporean cuisine, haha.
Though Riley laughed it off, I couldn't stomach the soup, so I avoided it and ate the other dishes. Then, I felt Trevor's sharp gaze.
Lila, I went through the trouble of ordering this, so make sure you drink the soup.
Startled by Trevor's outburst, I hurriedly gulped down the soup. It still tasted weird. The strange taste spread throughout my mouth, and I tried to cleanse my palate with water and other dishes. Gradually, my vision blurred, and I found myself slumping over the table.
What's happening? I'm incredibly sleepy. This isn't good. I'll really fall asleep. I need to stay awake.
As my consciousness faded, I could hear Riley's laughter.
It seems to have worked. Dad, is that thing ready? Of course, it's all set. It's in the dresser drawer in the bedroom. The new ones are amazing, only 0.01 millimeters thick. We didn't have those when I was young.
Realizing Riley and Trevor were discussing contraceptives, I felt a sense of danger but then lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed.
What happened?
I murmured groggily.
Oh, thank goodness. You're awake.
Looking towards the voice, there was our neighbor, Luella. Luella immediately called the doctor, who explained that I had been given a large dose of sleeping pills.
Sleeping pills! So that's why the soup tasted so odd.
Then, I learned from Luella.
Your dad and husband ran off in the car, so I accompanied you in the ambulance. I'm so glad you woke up safely. Really? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble. But what do you mean Dad and my husband fled in a car?
Actually,
Luella found out that the fire alarm was ringing at my in-laws' house and it wouldn't stop, so she decided to check on them. When she rang the doorbell, Trevor came out.
Yes.
What's going on, ringing the fire alarm like this? It's been going off for so long. Haven't you found the source yet? This is serious. I'm coming in. Please, it's okay. Don't come into the house. What are you talking about? We're supposed to help each other out in times of need.
Luella said that, barging into the house, and found me lying listlessly in the living room.
Oh my! You've collapsed from inhaling smoke. This is terrible. I need to call an ambulance right away. No, this is different.
Trevor and my husband tried to deny it hastily, but Luella was convinced I had collapsed from smoke inhalation and called for emergency and fire services on the spot.
Lila is just sleeping. That's right. My wife is just tired and sleeping. There's nothing to worry about.
Despite their desperate explanations, Luella objected.
It's strange that she won't wake up with such a loud noise going on. I'm worried. I wonder if the ambulance will arrive soon.
Luella was frantic. Before we knew it, people had started gathering. Riley and Trevor began to sweat profusely. Soon after, Riley and Trevor hurriedly jumped into a car and fled, leaving me behind. That's why Luella ended up accompanying me in the ambulance.
Such a thing. Thank you so much.
I expressed my gratitude to Luella. Then, when I told the doctor about the conversation I heard between Riley and Trevor before losing consciousness, he grimaced and made a call, and I was informed that Riley and Trevor were also admitted to the same hospital.
Riley and Dad are hospitalized. Why?
Apparently, after fleeing the house in the car, Riley and Trevor were driving frantically to get as far away as possible. As a result, the car Riley was driving crashed into the wall of a mansion, causing an accident. Both were brought to this hospital by ambulance, severely injured with broken bones, but their lives were not in danger. Hearing the reason for their admission, I was overwhelmed with anger, disgust, and various other emotions.
They got what they deserved. I'll never forgive them.
I decided to hire a lawyer and sue over this incident. Then, sleeping pills were detected in the soup bowl I had finished, and Riley and Trevor were arrested for assault. The news even reported on the incident. Later, during the police investigation, they were rearrested for attempted rape. Trevor was stressed from being busy with Emerson's funeral and other matters, becoming frustrated. He was planning to visit a nightclub, but when Riley found out, he made a proposition to Trevor.
Dad, if you're that frustrated, I can lend you Lila. But in return, give me Mom's kimonos. Really? I'd be thrilled to be with young Lila, but... Why Mom's kimonos? Are you running out of money? Yeah, I kinda blew through my savings.
Riley had squandered his savings on gambling and offered me in exchange for Emerson's kimonos, which came from a distinguished family and were valuable. Riley knew this and proposed the trade to Trevor.
Lila doesn't know I'm hooked on gambling. I've used quite a bit from our joint savings account, so I want to cover it up before she finds out. I see. But I can't imagine Lila agreeing to be with me. That's okay. I have a good idea. You still have some of Mom's sleeping pills, right?
Emerson had been prescribed sleeping pills for her insomnia before she passed away. With those sleeping pills remaining, Riley and Trevor concocted their plan. They decided to dissolve powdered sleeping pills in the soup and proceed after I had fallen asleep.
Perfect plan, right? This way I get money, and Dad's frustration is relieved. It's all good. Right. Let's invite Lila over for a dinner party next weekend.
However, their scheme was abruptly foiled by the ringing of the fire alarm, leading to the foolish outcome of causing an accident in their haste to flee in the car. It turns out Riley and Trevor are hospitalized in the same room.
Damn it! How did it come to this? It was supposed to be a perfect plan.
If only the fire alarm hadn't gone off. In the end, we couldn't do anything with Lila and ended up getting seriously injured. What a mess.
Damn it!
As they openly wept and voiced their grievances, a nurse visiting their room informed them with displeasure. I had demanded compensation through a lawyer in the divorce proceedings, but both of them flatly refused to pay any settlement for the divorce.
To demand compensation from me, her husband, in a divorce trial. Nothing actually happened, so it should be fine. That's right! In the end, all we did was give Lila sleeping pills and nothing else.
Both their reasoning left me and my lawyer utterly dumbfounded. Even when told that administering sleeping pills without consent is unacceptable, they wouldn't listen at all. Moreover,
Hey! Lila! Tell the police not to sue me and Dad. If the victim asks for a non-prosecution, the police won't sue, right?
they had the audacity to command. How low could they possibly be? I continued to ignore them, but they persistently demanded not to sue and to ask for a lighter sentence. However, their demands suddenly stopped at one point. After giving orders every day, it was strange for them to suddenly cease. Curious, I decided to investigate. It turns out they had encountered a serious problem. The owner of the mansion whose wall was destroyed when Riley and Trevor crashed into it was furious and had demanded they pay for the repairs. The damage was extensive, so the cost of repairs was significant. Moreover, my husband had lied, saying,
"We were rushing to the hospital because Dad was suffering from an illness, and that led to the driving mistake."
However, the incident was reported in the news. Upon learning the truth, the mansion owner became even more enraged and insisted on receiving both the repair costs and compensation from the divorce trial. As a result, Riley and Trevor seemed to have bigger problems than just dealing with me.
"It wasn't on purpose. Please forgive us. We beg you."
Riley and Trevor were pleading, but the mansion owner was unforgiving. They were told they must pay no matter what. Since the mansion owner hired a lawyer, Riley and Trevor also had to hire one to handle the situation. Since I had a lawyer as well, the compensation for the divorce was smoothly negotiated between the lawyers. Given their clear wrongdoing, our demands were almost fully met. I also demanded and received the money Riley had misappropriated from our joint savings account. Although I hadn't noticed his gambling addiction, I remembered how his overtime had suddenly increased at one point. Probably, he was lying about working late and going to pachinko instead. And so, I naturally proceeded with the divorce from Riley. The negotiations were handled by our lawyers, and though initially reluctant, Riley agreed to the divorce when I firmly insisted. Riley's lawyer played a significant role by convincing them that they were in a very unfavorable position and needed to show sincerity. Later, I went to thank our neighbor Luella again.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude.
Oh, I didn't do anything special. It's good that you're safe. Perhaps Emerson was looking out for you.
Emerson, you say? What do you mean? After I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the firefighters came and checked the cause of the fire alarm. However, the only source of fire in the house was a candle on Emerson's altar, which no one should have lit. This wasn't enough to trigger the fire alarm, indicating a possible malfunction as there were no other signs of fire.
Maybe Emerson is always watching over you? She was so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law.
Luella told me with a smile. It might have been a coincidence, but even so, I felt a warmth thinking about Emerson's kind smile. After expressing my thanks to Luella again, I headed to a certain cake shop. This shop sells a chocolate cake that I've always loved. When I had promised to have tea time with Emerson, I wanted her to try the chocolate from this cake shop. After buying sweet buns, I went to the florist to buy flowers that matched Emerson's cheerful image, with a fresh impression, and headed to visit her grave. Offering the flowers and chocolate at the grave, I expressed my gratitude to Emerson.
Dear Emerson, thank you so much. Your help saved me. Though I've divorced Riley, I will always love you, Mom.
I wished I could have talked more with Emerson. I wanted to have that tea party.
This chocolate was meant to be shared with you, Emerson, during our tea time. It's really delicious.
Just then, the wind blew softly. Feeling as if Emerson had responded, a tear fell from my eye. But thinking that crying would worry Emerson, I lifted my face, smiled, and said,
I'll visit again, Emerson.
And moved on. I decided to take the chocolate back with me later, as I couldn't leave it at the grave. On the way home, I felt incredibly refreshed. Despite everything, I vowed to live energetically from tomorrow on. Returning to single life, I threw myself into work more than ever before. Riley and Trevor, with their complex fractures, seemed to still be in the hospital. The owner of the mansion is trying to collect the repair costs before they are discharged and sent to prison, and it seems they had to sell their car and belongings to pay back the money using their savings. Physically and mentally devastated, and with prison time awaiting them. They are experiencing a living hell. I hope they reflect deeply and pay for their crimes once they are discharged and sent to prison. Since then, I've been visiting Emerson's grave regularly, updating her on my life. Having had enough of love for a while, I've decided to enjoy being single and am studying hard to earn new qualifications. I plan to live every day without regrets. My husband called me disgusting for my severe morning sickness, looking down on me with cold eyes.
You're the one who threw up and made a mess, right? Hurry up and open the window to air it out. If the smell sticks, you're paying for it. Just because you find it hard to go shopping or cook doesn't mean morning sickness isn't an illness. Don't be so stupid.
On top of that, as my morning sickness got worse, my husband left me at home and went on an overseas trip with mother-in-law, Audrina. That was the last straw for me, and I began to plot my revenge. A week later, my husband called, furious. I laughed it off.
Since you told me to clean the house, I did just as you said. Got a problem with that?
I'm Kimberly, a 28-year-old office worker. My husband, Eamon, and I live in a detached house and both work while we've recently become pregnant. While I was happy, my morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't go to work on some days. Fortunately, many at my workplace were understanding.
Once you get through this, it'll get easier, so make sure to rest and take care of yourself.
They gave me some time off when I was considering quitting. So, I spent my days at home, resting as much as possible, eating when I could, and doing household chores. The problem was my husband. He practically stopped doing any housework at all.
You're always at home, right? Even a pregnant woman can clean, so at least do that.
While my husband used to do household chores when we were both working, he stopped doing anything since I took my leave. Even when I said I couldn't do it because of severe nausea, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he compared me to other pregnant women he had seen, saying,
"Just being lazy and slacking off in the name of morning sickness."
Furthermore, he was extremely averse to me vomiting. The first time I vomited at home, I didn't make it to the toilet and ended up using the living room trash can. Seeing this, my husband, pinching his nose, hurried me to ventilate the room and kept yelling at me, even though my nausea hadn't subsided. Although I vomited into a plastic bag in the trash can, so the can itself wasn't dirty, he made me dispose of the bag and then threw the trash can away.
Hey, what's with that attitude? Why are you telling me to open a window when I'm vomiting? You could open it yourself. And I properly sealed the double bag before throwing it away, so why throw out the trash can in front of me as if to make a point?
Disgusting, smelly, don't talk.
Even if it's in a plastic bag, droplets might have gotten on the trash can.
After that, no matter what I said, don't talk because it's smelly. He wouldn't even listen. I started to consider divorce. Maybe once my morning sickness settled down and I could go back to work, my husband would return to being the kind and helpful person he used to be. But could a husband who hurled such abuse at me while I was suffering return to how he was? Or was this his true nature? As I worried, my morning sickness only got worse. With nausea hitting me multiple times a day, I started carrying a plastic bag with me everywhere in the house to vomit without my husband seeing and dispose of it. However, one time, I didn't manage to dispose of it in time, and he saw me with the bag.
"Don't touch anything, all right? You're paying for the sofa you just sat on since you're going to dispose of it because you dirted it."
He looked at me with utter disgust. When I impulsively brought up divorce, I noticed he was holding a pamphlet in his hand. He spread it out to show me.
"In about 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip overseas with Mom. We plan to stay for about a week. Don't slack off on cleaning just because I'm not here. Keep the house clean."
What? What are you thinking?
While looking at me coldly, my husband laughed in a low voice.
"I don't want to stay in a house you've made filthy. The morning sickness should settle down in about 3 weeks, right? By the time I'm back from the trip, it should be nearly over, so clean the house in the meantime."
Fine.
I'll give the house a thorough cleaning.
The next 2 weeks were tough for me. He doubled down on doing nothing, even eating strongly scented meals or spraying harsh perfume around the room despite my pleas because it made me nauseous. Despite locking me in the bathroom, he'd bang on the door furiously and yell if he wanted to use it himself. This lifestyle continued. I immediately informed my parents that I had decided on divorce. Since my husband's attitude changed, I had been discussing it with my parents, who must have realized from my words that convincing me otherwise was no longer possible. They told me to come back home immediately. However, just divorcing and returning to my parents' home wasn't enough for me. I was determined to teach my husband, who lacked any awareness of being a father and thought nothing of the individual differences in pregnancy and morning sickness, a lesson. 2 weeks later, I saw my husband off with a large carry-on bag. These 2 weeks were the peak of my morning sickness, and I had lost more than 2 kilos. If it continued like this, I would end up hospitalized due to severe pregnancy sickness. Seeing me visibly thinner, my husband still called me dirty and, after repeatedly ordering me to clean the house, fled like he was escaping. I stayed at the entrance until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and made a phone call. A week later, I was leisurely sitting in my parents' living room when calls from my husband kept coming in. Calls from my husband kept coming in one after another. After watching for a while, my parents started to panic, so I reluctantly answered.
Don't mess with me. What the hell is this? Explain.
I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear at the sound of my husband's loud voice the moment the call connected. Still, I sighed at the loud enough voice and listened to him.
I can't get into the house. What's going on? Don't change the locks on me while I'm away.
The real estate agent changed them. It's kind of gross to have the same keys as the previous tenant for the next one, right? So, they changed the locks when selling the house. Huh? Real estate agent? Oh, didn't you see the sign? It's right there next to it, for sale. There was silence on the phone for a while before the angry voice came again.
What are you doing on your own? Who gave you permission to sell it? Why are you selling it?
You said the whole house smells. So, I cleaned the entire house, including that. And why would I need anyone's permission to sell my house?
Your house. That's not right. That house belongs to your grandfather. It's a crime to sell it without being the title holder.
That house was given to me, I remodeled it, and it's in my name. You can't just sell it if you're not the title holder. Indeed, the house we lived in belonged to my grandfather. However, after my grandfather passed away, I, still single, remodeled it into its current form, and after getting married, my husband moved in to live together. My husband was momentarily speechless knowing the title was in my name, but quickly changed his approach.
That house is where I live too. You can't just kick out a resident like that. It's illegal to sell my stuff. Besides, it was our house since we lived there as a couple, so it's not just your house anymore.
Unfortunately, that house was in my name before we got married. We never changed it to a joint title after marriage. Plus, I moved all the stuff out after, so your things are all safe. I did dispose of the sofa you said was smelly, though. My husband seemed panicked by the mention of moving out his belongings. He was asking where and when. It's at your grandmother's house. After all, you're away with Dad gone and no siblings. There was nowhere else to send it but your grandmother's when you went overseas with Audrina. Hearing his belongings were at his kind grandmother's house seemed to calm my husband for a moment, but his voice quickly filled with anger again.
So, you're the kind of woman who sells the house and dumps the belongings while her husband is on a trip. I'm divorcing you. I'll sue for compensation in the divorce court because of this.
It's a relief you're the one bringing up divorce. I don't want you to come to the house anymore, and I'll be heading there with my lawyer soon. So, goodbye. I wonder if my husband truly believed he could win if he took it to court. I calmed my panicking parents while contacting a lawyer. A week later, when I went to what my husband calls his in-laws' house, Audrina slapped me before I even entered the door. I had expected it and deliberately received the slap.
Because of you, the house is a mess. A woman who can't even do housework because of a little morning sickness is useless. Pay the compensation in the divorce court and let's divorce.
As I was rubbing my stinging cheek, planning to retort to Audrina, she saw someone behind me and her face twisted. I thought you showed no remorse, but to strike immediately upon meeting is something else. Behind me was Carol, my husband's grandmother, looking furious. Hello. I'm really sorry for sending the belongings over so suddenly the other day. That's all right. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have noticed at all. I had come to the in-laws' house, which was now the home of my husband's grandmother who had kindly accepted his belongings. When I sent my husband's belongings, I included a letter of apology detailing everything about our situation. As a result, the grandmother was furious with her grandson's husband for hurling terrible words at his wife suffering from morning sickness and leaving her to fend for herself. She was equally furious at Audrina for going on an overseas trip with him without admonishing such behavior. The grandmother, now 80 years old, is a gentle figure to her grandson but a disagreeable mother-in-law to Audrina. Since Audrina married into the family, her relationship with the grandmother, due to their clashing personalities, has always been like cats and dogs. Sure enough, Audrina, upon suddenly facing the grandmother, twisted her face in obvious annoyance, which only fueled the grandmother's anger further. After briefly addressing the shouting match between the two, I entered the house. There, my husband stood, dumbfounded next to the grandmother and Audrina. It might have been shocking for my husband to see his kind grandmother and mother arguing so fiercely. However, wanting to discuss matters with my husband without Audrina's interference, I had informed the grandmother of my visit in advance. And we started the divorce negotiation with my lawyer before Audrina could return. The process didn't take much time and ended smoothly. The compensation amount my husband had prepared for the divorce court and its basis were systematically dismantled by my lawyer, leaving him speechless. After a thorough division of assets and agreeing not to approach me except when visiting our child after its birth, my husband readily agreed, and our marriage ended abruptly. As I was leaving the house, the grandmother and Audrina were still standing next to each other. I addressed them briefly before departing, but they seemed too heated in their argument to pay me any mind. Subsequently, I began receiving a barrage of complaint-like emails from my ex-husband. Apparently, he became annoyed with the grandmother coming to the in-laws' house and meddling. Imagining my former husband and Audrina, who had shouted at me so boldly, becoming meek in front of a petite grandmother, finally brought me to laughter. However, the nature of my ex-husband's emails soon shifted towards seeking reconciliation.
Every day there's shouting.
They both ask me what I think when they're fighting, dragging me into it, and it's annoying. It's a lifetime request. Please, let me stay at your place. I'll do household chores or anything. I won't do anything terrible again, and I'll never say it. I want to meet our coming child too. I love you. I want to remarry you.
I responded mechanically.
I will not reconcile. As for the child, you can meet if you pay child support.
And left it at that. Eventually, the messages from my ex-husband ceased. Apparently, unable to bear the living conditions, he left Audrina and went somewhere. Not providing any support, Audrina, not yet of pensionable age, is scraping by on her savings. Audrina herself contacted me with this news.
No one's helping me. Please, I want to stay at your place. I only went on the trip with my son because he invited me. I had no idea you were suffering so much from morning sickness.
She claimed, lining up convenient excuses over the phone, but when I threatened to report her to the police, the calls stopped. Apparently, the grandmother also refused to help, and Audrina, limited by her savings, began working part-time. Thus, she no longer had the energy to call or email me. However, the altercation between the grandmother and Audrina that day is well known throughout the neighborhood, and they saw me deliberately receiving Audrina's slap. Consequently, the neighbors have distanced themselves from Audrina, leaving her to live uncomfortably in her home. Seemingly unable to afford renting a new apartment, she spends her days diminishing in stature. Yet, living alone in a rent-free house should be manageable on a part-time income. My morning sickness has finally subsided, and I no longer vomit. The doctor, learning of my divorce and the circumstances around it, scolded me for accumulating too much stress, which wouldn't help in healing. Though I had been consulting with my family, the stress from living with an uncooperative ex-husband for a while, and dealing with real estate agents online to sell the house, had been too much on my body, and I reflected on this. Moving forward, I plan to avoid stress and return to work. Anyway, I'll be taking maternity leave before giving birth, planning to live at my parents' house. Now, imagining the appearance of my unborn child brings me immense joy. As the days go by, my anticipation grows, and I can hardly wait to see what kind of child will be born. No matter what, I intend to raise my child with love.